ask Andy Burnham, is the clean air zone paused? Why are all the signs still going up? Why are you not pausing them?
This is not my direct responsibility, Mike, to run the contract for the signs. So, I'll look into that, but I would imagine there is going to be a pause on that. So this has been something we've discussed all this year, isn't it? I have said all along, Mike, that we needed to get the government's legal direction lifted.
What's the change now? What effectively is the position?
So here's what happened. All year I've been saying to you on the hot seat, the scheme as it was conceived is not workable anymore. It was developed in the pre-pandemic time, and so consequently it's kind of hit a world that's very different, and therefore it doesn't work because it was developed for different times. And if I'm honest, Mike, that realisation came late last year. And, we then kind of started to work with the government to say, look, this isn't going to work. And January was quite frustrating because, I was trying to make that argument and all. And I understand why people were all, were feeling as they did and as they do. But finally, I got to sit down with the leader of Trafford Council, Andrew Weston. We sat down with the government minister last week, and we said, look, you have to lift this, kind of free us from the straitjacket of a clean air zone.
Are you playing catch up with this to a certain extent?
Well, as I say, I realised late last year that it was in trouble because of the change in the way the vehicle market had gone. And people couldn't access vehicles at the right price, and the money that was there to support people to change vehicles wasn't going to be enough. And so I was kind of reflecting some of that with you on this programme late last year. And then as we hit January, I was saying we're going to have to go back to the government. I said that to the leaders of the councils late last year. We're going to have to go back to the government. This is not going to work. And then obviously the outcry came, which I fully understand. But we got to sit down with the government last week. So here's the answer to your question.
What's the route map?
So here's the answer to your question. We were being asked to clean up the air by 2024, and that was not achievable because the vehicles just weren't there. So the government have agreed to lift that direction, and this week they've issued us with a new legal direction based on 2026. And we believe that allows us to plot a very different course now to clean air in Greater Manchester. So over the next couple of months, what people will see is kind of new proposals emerging for how we do this, minimising the charges if having them at all.
Will nobody be charged now for a while?
Well, you wouldn't want it was never about. I know people feel this would have been about raising money, but actually it was never meant to be about that. It was always meant to be an incentive scheme for people to change their vehicles so that then we could all clean up the air. Just let me answer this point though, Mike. The reason why people felt it was about charging was when they couldn't access those vehicles and the prices of them had gone up, because they know they'd have been hit with those charges with no way of escaping them. And that's why we are where we are.
But can you rule charges out then for the immediate future?
It ultimately, and this is again a bit of a frustration, but it's ultimately not my decision. So the government has issued a new direction on the councils, and the decision makers are the government and the councils, because there's an agreement now jointly to develop a new scheme. Of course, I will play my role in the middle of that, mediating and trying to get the right scheme for Greater Manchester. So I'm not in a position to say, I can't say, yes, there will be, no, there won't be. I think we need to minimise any recourse to charging. And if you could, not have it at all. But I can't say to you at the moment that is exactly where we'll end up.
OK, and I'm going to throw it completely on the other side now. So you're going to get clean air campaigners, I'm putting words in their mouth, who will say, well, you've bottled it. That's a 2-year delay, and people now are going to be affected by pollution 2 years longer than they should have been, and it's your fault.
So what I would say to those people is 2024 was not achievable. So there simply were not the vehicles available to come into Greater Manchester to achieve the air compliance by 2024. So it's not a case of bottling it. It just wasn't doable. And everybody actually in the end has agreed with that. The vehicles are not being manufactured quickly enough to get the change that we need. So to sit there and say, no, we're digging in on 2024 and allow loads of people, thousands of people, small businesses, plumbers, window cleaners, painters and decorators to just be hit with charges, knowing that they couldn't, even if they wanted to, they couldn't get to a new vehicle. That would have been the most dishonest and wrong thing that we could possibly have done. And the truth of the matter is, Mike, the pandemic is going to cause at least 2 years disruption to supply lines, and therefore 2026 is justifiable. And let me say this to campaigners, there will still be a clean air zone in Greater Manchester.
Is it their victory, though? Those campaigners will say that it's not you that's brought this about, it's us campaigning that has forced the government's hand and thus brought this about.
Well, certainly the voice of people came through, no question. I mean, to be honest, although it's been hard, I have actually found it helpful, because I said to the 10 leaders just before Christmas, actually early December, that we were going to have to go back to the government. So, you know, we'd done this sort of funding package with the government in July 2021, and they'd refused to fully fund our package because they didn't give us a hardship scheme. So I was worried about it from then onwards. And as I say, probably should have got onto it a little earlier, if I'm honest, Mike, but I started to spot these problems in the vehicle market October, November. I commissioned research, and by December, I knew that the scheme we had, designed pre-pandemic, was just not going to work post-pandemic. And I said, at that point, we're going to have to go back to the government. Now, I said that privately, but then when the outcry started, I mean, to be honest with you, it almost it was saying the same thing as the realisation that I'd come to. And I think the result of that is it's helped us get to a better place where we sat down with the government last Friday. We've agreed a different way forward that allows this to be done in a much fairer way than it would have been done. And in the end, that is the right outcome. And tomorrow at the combined authority meeting, Mike, I will set out a sort of next steps for people as to where we go from here. So everyone is really clear about how we do this properly now and engage everybody and hopefully get to cleaner air, but without sacrificing people's jobs along the way.
Okay, Andrew, I know that you're waiting. He does actually say, Andy says, can you tell Burnham? Okay, fair enough.
I can see what's coming now.
Yeah. The original plan wasn't ever achievable. I've got a £4,000 van, like a load of tradesmen. I would need about £12,000 to upgrade to a compliant vehicle. There is no way on earth we would ever get that. It would cost billions. So all this shortage of vans and prices going up, Mark said, is a load of rubbish.
Well, I mean, that's his view. I have to be honest and say that, you know, I wasn't. Everyone says it was my plan. I mean, that's been thrown at me all year so far, but it actually wasn't. It was a plan signed off by the government with the councils because of the extent of the polluted air problem in Greater Manchester. It was meant to be an incentive scheme. Because bear in mind, Mike, it's not a bad thing, given that everyone has to buy a new vehicle from time to time. It's not a bad thing, is it, to offer, you know, a few £1,000s to people towards the cost of a vehicle, given that some people are going to be upgrading vehicles anyway in the course of their business. The problem with the scheme was, I think, the lack of the hardship fund that I've talked about. That would have been funding for people with the oldest vans. So, you know, what's called Euro 3 or Euro 4, worth a few £100. That was definitely the problem. And I was talking about that from the summer onwards last year, because the government took a decision at that point not to help people in that position. And I think that was a real problem. For businesses that were like, let's say, more medium size or bigger, well, to be honest, you know, they were getting financial help to change vans. And I think that was reasonable. And just so people don't get into a kind of mindset, Mike, where they think this is all bad and it's all terrible and there's nothing good about it. Buses in Greater Manchester. If you go back to 2018, 10% of the buses on our roads met the clean air emission standards, so 90% didn't. Now, as a result of the clean air zone coming in, 80% this year will meet emission standards. Now, if you think of the buses that go around schools at leaving time, currently, or in the past, we've had dirty air and choking the kids as they've come out of school because they were all old buses. The Clean Air Zone will change that, and it will improve the health of our kids. And there are benefits to this as well as some of the challenges.
Marie is
Coin, and that other side hasn't been heard as much, has it, since the start of the year, for understandable reasons. But there is another side to this, and I touched on it a moment ago with regard to buses, old buses on our roads. We've had a load of rubbish on our roads for a long time, Mike. And they're not just polluting, they're noisy. They're unsafe, some of them, because they're so old. And I think the bus companies have taken us for a ride. Well, they have, haven't they, literally, but in the other way as well, because, why should a city like ours have some of the oldest bus fleet on its streets? But we have had, because we've had no ability in the deregulated, privatised bus world to remove or order the bus companies to get the rubbish off the roads. But now we can, because of the Clean Air Zone and because of the putting of buses under public control, which is what I've decided to do. And as I said, Mike, there is a massive, demonstrable change in the bus fleet that will benefit kids, because those buses are congregating outside colleges and schools, and those kids are breathing in that air that's coming out of those exhaust pipes. So there is real positive change. But to those who say, oh well, you've delayed this too long, as I come back to it, there's no point sticking to a plan that is not achievable, and our plan wasn't achievable. Given the changes in the vehicle market.
Ringers on Salford is my next caller. Stuart, good morning.
Good morning.
Morning, Stuart.
Good morning, Andrew. Can I just ask a quick question? We obviously own a taxi company in Salford, and we've got 3 vehicles to be compliant by eventually when the Clean Air comes in. Now, back in December, we've obviously ordered 2 new vehicles on the strength that we was getting funding, and the funding should have come out back in the back end of January. I believe that funding's now been put back, and we don't know the reason why this funding's been put back. But we're now in limbo because we've ordered 2 vehicles to make 2 of ours compliant. And we haven't signed up for these vehicles at the moment because they're on the way from a factory from wherever they're coming to, and we won't get them until the back end of April. But we're very mindful now whether we're going to get the funding that's been promised from the beginning. Can you just relate on that, please, Andrew?
Yeah, that's a really fair question, Stuart, and it's one I will take away and ask TFGM to give us an answer to, because I guess there'll be quite a lot of people in your position. You made an order in good faith because you thought we're going to be asked to meet the deadline. And with all of the pause, you've been affected by that. So I think you're in a position where my instincts would say you deserve to be supported because you've done the right thing. The good thing that came out of our discussions with the minister last week, Mike.
Any news on the funding?
Well, that's what I was coming to. We got the delay, but she committed to keeping the 120 million that we secured. So that funding is still there. And I think that can be used more cleverly now and carefully to support people doing the right thing. So, Stuart, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to take your company details off Mike's team, and I'll get TFGM to look into your situation and give you a precise answer. But instinctively, I would say anybody in the position like you are in, we should be honouring what you've done to try and do the right thing.
Stuart, just give the details to either Charlie or Anne. Thank you.
We will do. Just have a quick question on that. The £120 million that you just mentioned, is that for the Taxi and Private Hire Association within Greater Manchester, or does the white van man now come into that funding?
That funding was everybody. So, I mean, that was the concern we've always raised, was that enough? But as we redesign the scheme, Stuart, so it will be different. Let me be really clear with you. The scheme as was is not, that's finished. I mean, that isn't what's coming back. There's going to be a new scheme, Mike, coming back. And what we're going to try and do is make sure that 120 million is used much more cleverly to be able to get to the same result, which is air that is of legal standards across Greater Manchester. So it might mean that we distribute it in a different way, but it's probably an opportunity, Stuart, to get the help where it's needed, to be honest.
If you look at the moral dimension, the likes of Stuart, those that might have already taken delivery of a vehicle thinking I'm being really prescient here, I've got the vehicle, I'll get the funding in a few more weeks. If that funding runs dry, can you procure more if the stewards of this world need to be funded because they've done as you asked, but the actual funding runs out?
Well, that's partly what we agreed with the government. We said that they can't just put a limit on it. We've got to get to the compliance as quickly as we can. But the minute we're there, that's it. We switch the clean air zone off. I mean, that is what we're saying to them. So you can't just put an arbitrary limit on it of 120 million, Mike. And we've talked with the minister about this. It's got to be as much as we're going to need to support the new scheme to get all the way through. And I can understand people who've changed their vehicles because they thought it was coming through, thinking, well, hang on a minute, I've done the right thing here. But they've still done the right thing. And actually, they are now contributing to cleaner air in Greater Manchester. So, and those with HGVs and buses they've been able to access the funding. So, it's what we want to do is really engage people now in the coming time. We've got time to do this and treat people fairly, as I said. Use the money as well as we can use it, and let's get to clean air. And then, Mike, and this is something I just want to get over to people today. We're going to switch it off the minute we're there, and we've got that. There's no congestion charge. I've said to you before, there never will be when I'm there, never. And I want a consultation as soon as we can on using that infrastructure for policing purposes, because Greater Manchester Police would like to take over that infrastructure, using it for policing. And I think that is, in the end, with all of this pain, could be quite a good outcome for Greater Manchester.
I think we're still on Clean Air Zone with David in Denshire, or related to that. Hi, David. Good morning.
Hi, good morning. Good morning,
David.
Mr. Mayor.
Good morning.
Right, can I just ask you, you're talking about funding there. Can I just ask about people such as myself who have a HGV? I'm a retired person, but I use a HGV for my hobby. So obviously, there'll be no funding. I can't get a bank loan to buy a new truck, which wouldn't be feasible. So what happens to us, the people that have horse boxes? People that have vans that is used for privates?
Well, good question. And, obviously it's a very rare category, isn't it? People with an HGV for private use. I don't think there's many of you around Greater Manchester, but you are asking a fair question. We did say, Mike, in any event now, I don't think people with motorhomes, camper vans, horse boxes should be part of the scheme. People who are not using it for business purposes. You've raised a different category there, which is an HGV for private use. Now, I've not heard of that.
David, can I just clarify? Is this like a show truck? Is this a heritage vehicle?
Well, the truck's a heritage vehicle, which is looked after, but we do heritage stock car racing.
Right, so
you can't carry goods.
Okay.
Well, we'd have to take a look at the situation. Honestly, I wouldn't want to give an off-the-cuff answer, Mike, because it is that's quite obviously a rare category. But all of this can go in the mix now as we kind of work to a joint plan with the government, because that's what we're doing now until July. Just to be clear with people, Mike, we've got a few months now up to July to agree a new way forward with the government, and we're going to sign it off together, because everyone was saying in the early part of this year, it was all Greater Manchester, you decided everything, it was all down to... And the truth is it wasn't. The government required us to work on the basis of a charging clean air zone. However, let's move beyond that. We're going to do a joint plan with them, and I think all of these issues can be considered, David, as part of that joint plan, so people have absolute clarity come July of what is in and what is not in, and those who are in, what they can access, and then whatever is coming in will come in beyond that.
I'll try and squeeze